And you can see in those two arrows, they're going in opposite directions, which often is what happens for we humans. We have a longing to connect, but something feels too dangerous, too vulnerable, not safe enough to do that. And so this drive to survive takes us in the other direction. In this webinar, we're going to really play around with looking at trauma through looking at autonomic challenges, so the way the nervous system feels challenged, and then finding what I call polyvagal guided solutions. So finding solutions that are, again, based in helping your nervous system come into a place of safety and regulation. As we go to this first slide, we're going to look at these three elements of context, choice, and connection. And these three qualities are things that the nervous system is looking for. And when they're present, the nervous system really feels as if it can come into safety and reach out for connection. It finds regulation. And what I've discovered is when any one of these elements is missing, the nervous system feels a bit of unease, feels a flavor of danger, and has a more difficult time finding the way back or staying in regulation. So next slide, we're going to look at these one at a time, and we'll start with context. And context is this, what I call the why, what, and how of an experience. And it's something that is not routinely, explicitly apparent in our connections with people, in our interactions as we move through the world. And so it really is helpful if we learn how to ask for that information, to get some clarity around that, and also to offer that information when we're interacting with other people. So this kind of gives the nervous system a way to feel safe, to engage in connection, and then begin to explore an experience or to explore a relationship. So, nowadays, especially because many people are doing work online and through screens, context can be missing. And it really is important for us to be explicit, to give information along with the voice or the look or the invitation or the email or the text that answers those questions, why, what, and how. So the question that you can begin to use to explore this particular element is, how is context either missing in this present moment, so missing in the moment I'm in right now, or missing in the current situation that I find myself in. So context is both an in this moment and a larger contextual situational experience. So if we move from context to choice, choice is something that the nervous system appreciates. And when choice is limited, or when we feel as though we've run out of options, the nervous system takes that in as a cue of danger and will begin to activate a survival response. It'll either bring us that sense of unease and mobilization that might bring a bit of feeling anxious or angry, or it might activate that place where we go into that disconnect, give up, let go, get out of your place. So again, choice is important. And we, again, don't regularly offer choice in our experiences with other people. So the question, again, is what choices can you offer when you are wanting to connect and create a relationship with someone that brings a sense of safety? So, for instance, somebody wanted to have a Zoom contact with me, and I answered back. I said, here are 3 options that would work for me, hoping that would send to the other nervous system that sense of that it's not just this that works. There are 3 options. Instead of saying, okay, I can meet you at 7 a.m. and that's the only thing I have, which is a limiting experience. So you might even feel that in your nervous system when I say that. Here are 3 options, as opposed to this is the only time I can do it. And you just notice what happens inside. So again, this question, how is this moment in time or my current situation impacting this question about choice? And then finally, this last slide about connection. And the ability to be in what we call ventral vagal regulation, which is this place of our biology brings us the ability to feel safe and regulate and connect, and then offer that regulating energy to others, is one of the essential ingredients in coming into safe connection. So first, I have to be in that place in order to offer it to you. And connecting, moments of disconnection and coming back into connection is what is the richness of a relationship. It's the normal expected path of a relationship. And yet, again, we don't often bring these into explicit awareness. And so we may have connection and then have a moment of disconnection and come back into connection, but never really address that disconnection. So if we bring them into explicit awareness and name them, it increases the connection, it increases the ability of safety in the nervous system and safety between nervous systems. Again, something that we're really not taught to do, and is something that is really a biological resource that when we do it and bring these connection elements into this conversation between us, it deepens the trustworthiness of the relationship. And that last question again, so what is happening in this present moment that impacts connection? And that's my job to think, and then what's happening in this present moment to impact this connection, and then what's happening in the situation. So again, these context, choice, and connection elements are both in this moment and in a situation, and just want to make sure that we really think, here are three things that we can pay attention to, that we have a way to bring into the conversation between us, and that will help the nervous system feel a sense of being invited into safety. So now let's take a moment and head into what are the organizing principles of polyvagal theory. And I've put three basic principles here: co-regulation, neuroception, and hierarchy. And we're going to look at each one of them separately and give you a bit of an experience of each one of them. But just now, as we're getting the overview, co-regulation is what we call a biological imperative, which means it's something we can't live without. So we come into the world with this need to be connected to another person, to regulate with another person. And that need happens over the course of our lifetime. It never goes away. We have this need to be in co-regulating relationships. That's being tested right now, certainly, with the ways that we are being asked to limit connection with other people. So we want to think about that as we go through this, that co-regulation is a necessity. And how do we find ways to safely co-regulate? Now, neuroception is this lovely word that Stephen Porges, the developer of polyvagal theory, created. And I think it's a great description for the ways the nervous system is listening to what's going on in the world. So neuro for nervous system, and ception for perception. And so here we get this detection without awareness, because the nervous system is working below the level of your thinking brain. So it's listening beneath our conscious awareness, which is why we call it this detection without awareness. And then the third principle, hierarchy, which really just tells us we have three predictable pathways of responding to the world. We have what's called ventral vagal, what's called sympathetic, and what's called dorsal vagal. And we're going to dive into those as we move through this program. So let's start with this next slide with talking about co-regulation for a minute. And co-regulation really comes down to this nervous system experience of, is it safe to connect, right? And we have these two things that are going on all the time. We have the drive to survive, and we have the longing to connect. And you can see in those two arrows, they're going in opposite directions, which often is what happens for we humans. You know, we have a longing to connect, but something feels too dangerous, too vulnerable, not safe enough to do that. And so this drive to survive takes us in the other direction. It's a very common response. And you might stop a minute here and just think, when is the time recently when that happened to you? Right? When you had a longing to be in connection with someone, but you just couldn't find a way to reach out. So here I think is a lovely definition of trauma. This is Steve's definition. Trauma is a chronic disruption of connectedness. So if we know that co-regulation and connection is something we need in order to be alive and to experience well-being, then it makes sense that trauma comes from a chronic disruption of that experience. And what we know is that our trauma stories are carried in states of autonomic dysregulation. So our trauma stories actually live in our biology, right? And we know that. All of us who carry trauma and are working to resolve that trauma know that you can't think your way out of this, because this isn't a cognitive experience. This is an embodied experience. So here in this next slide, we really see that the nervous system is both shaped and regulated through our interactions with other people. And that's a good thing to remember, because in this moment in time where you're listening to this webinar, your nervous system has been shaped by each experience you've had right up until this moment. And now it's being shaped by the next moment and the next moment and the next moment. So the hopefulness about understanding your biology in this way is that even though your nervous system might have been shaped into a pattern of protection, in this moment, if you're feeling safe and regulated and connected, you're beginning to shape it into a pattern of connection. And the research tells us that the nervous system really can be reshaped in these ways. So what's happening is we are searching for these cues of safety or danger all the time. And those cues are being sent nervous system to nervous system. And they either co-regulate, so we're either feeling co-regulated, and then we have new possibilities emerging from that experience, or we're feeling this increased reactivity, we're feeling that flavor of danger, and then we reinforce our old habitual survival responses. So this is sort of the either or of the nervous system. Most things are both and, but this is one of those either ors. We're either in this place of co-regulation or we're in survival response. So, our work is to find, how do we find these pathways to be safely co-regulating with another person? Here's a quote on this next slide by Sieber and Fisher, which I really love. Without the experience of an organizing other, the nervous system is stunned. And just think about that for a minute. And I love that word, stunned. It really fits for me. And it's this experience of missing a regulating other. And what we know about trauma is the system is often shaped away from these patterns of connection and these pathways to connection towards protection. And it makes perfect sense on a biological level that would happen, right? But when we are regulated, and again, can be a regulating presence for others, then we're bringing that invitation to connection to another person. When we're dysregulated, when we're feeling unsafe in some way, this connection that we have with another, there will be a rupture there, a rupture in that autonomic attunement. And the other person's nervous system is going to take a move out of connection into their own habitual path towards protection. So you can see that this back and forth conversation that's happening between two nervous systems is really important for understanding how we feel safe with each other and why sometimes that longing to connect is interrupted by that drive to survive. So as we've begun to talk about co-regulation here, we're beginning to understand that this really is a conversation that's happening all the time, moment to moment, between nervous system and nervous system. And so learning how to tune in and speak that language is really important.